Chapter 5 Inspection and Packing Introduction. There are a dozen or more commonly seen harness container systems being actively used in the field today. The differences between them can be subtle or, in some cases, polar opposite. Most packing manuals can be found online or can be purchased from the container manufacturer. Canopy folding methods are fairly universal from rig to rig. It is the closing of the container that is proprietary. The single-pin rig shown in the following illustrations is somewhat representative of other single-pin reserves. Reserve static line, RSL, and main activated reserve deployment, MARD, configurations differ from rig to rig, and so individual manuals should be consulted for exact routing and setup. Rigs that use a pop-top or externally mounted reserve pilot chute differ significantly from the single-pin rigs. There are sport and pilot emergency rigs that utilize this design. For most people, parachute rigging is all about packing parachutes. Rigging and packing may be synonymous, but there is a distinct difference. In its truest form, parachute rigging is the practice of assembling a parachute system with its various components into an operative assembly. Packing is the practice of folding the parachute canopy in an organized manner such that it fits into the container system and allows the canopy to open when the user activates the system. There are 5 distinct stages involved in packing the parachute. They are: 1. Identification. 2. Inspection. 3. Rigging and/or repairs. 4. Packing. 5. Documentation. Identification. The first thing the rigger should do when a customer brings a parachute in for packing or repair is to confirm that the owner's information is correct on the packing data card. This ensures that the rigger's logbook entry is accurate. In a commercial loft, a work order is filled out with all the correct information about the customer and the parachute. Many lofts that do a high volume of business input this information into a computer database for tracking their customers. This data is then used to send automatic repack notices to customers. This ensures that the reserve or emergency parachute is legal to use when the customer needs it. Inspection. The owner should bring the parachute to the rigger in its packed condition. This practice should be encouraged for several reasons. The canopy is a fragile item and is subject to damage or contamination if left exposed to the elements, and the container is designed to protect the canopy from damage. The parachute should be opened only in the controlled environment of the parachute loft. This is so the entire system can be examined externally for signs of damage or contamination before it is opened. Next, the owner should don the parachute and pull the ripcord as in a real-life scenario to understand how to activate the system properly and experience what it feels like to actually pull the reserve ripcord. This gives the owner a great degree of confidence that the parachute will work when needed. It is something that jumpers rarely get to do, and their reaction is generally one of curiosity and satisfaction. Doing so also lets the owner see what is in there. It is surprising how many jumpers do not even know what color their reserve parachute is. Generally, customers leave the parachute to be repacked. However, riggers should invite their customers to stay and observe the repack. Many riggers encourage this behavior since it results in a more educated individual. In a busy loft environment, however, a scheduled appointment might be needed to allow for the increased time necessary to explain the process. If the customer decides to watch the inspection and repack, the rigger should allow at least twice the usual time for the project so the customer can ask questions. Another benefit of this is that the customer gets to see the effort it takes to service a parachute. Figure 5.1 shows a packing flow chart that details the sequence of events the rigger should follow from receiving the parachute to collecting the money from the customer. Upon completion of the visual inspection, there are 2 options for continuing. If there are no visual indications of damage or contamination, move on to the next step of opening the parachute. If something suspicious is found, or if there is a hole in the container or discoloration to the container fabric, the rigger needs to see if the damage penetrated into the canopy. To do so, note the location and check internally after opening the parachute. If the owner is participating in the inspection, it is a good idea to have them backed against the packing table or similar surface when they pull the ripcord so the canopy does not fall out on the floor. This keeps the canopy clean, but it also lets the rigger control the extraction of the canopy from the container. It is good practice to hold the canopy in the container while the owner takes off the pack. In the case of a bagged square reserve, the bag extraction force should be measured to ensure that it is not excessive. Place the rig on the table or clean floor and measure using a fish scale or by simply lifting the bag by its bridle. Bag extraction forces vary between brands of containers. The manufacturer of the given container should be able to provide a maximum acceptable extraction force in terms of pounds. The rigger can then proceed to thoroughly examine the previous pack job and to check those areas previously identified as damaged or contaminated. During the examination of the parachute for damage or contamination, the rigger should also look at how the previous rigger packed the canopy. Particularly in regard to pilot emergency parachutes, Riggers sometimes exercise great latitude in interpreting the packing instructions in order to make the parachute as comfortable as possible for the pilot. Each rigger makes the determination as to what is the correct packing method. If the present rigger finds that the last pack job was in error, the individual responsible needs to be notified of the findings. The rigger should then verify the make, model, and serial number of the parachute. Sometimes the canopy may have been changed in an assembly, particularly in a sport rig. For sport rigs and some emergency rigs, be sure to check the automatic activation device, AAD. The newest data cards provide space for information on the AAD to include service cycle and date of last battery replacement. With the recent widespread acceptance of AADs, this is one area the rigger cannot overlook. The battery life cycle, the unit service life cycle, and how they interface with the inspection and repack cycle of the parachute are very important things to consider. The major question the rigger must ask is, if the battery or unit service life expires during the upcoming inspection cycle, should the rigger pack the parachute and seal it, thereby certifying it for the next 180-day inspection cycle? A comparable situation would be if an airframe and power plant mechanic signs off an annual inspection on an aircraft. The mechanic is saying that the aircraft is airworthy at that time. However, the mechanic is not responsible for the future status of the aircraft if the emergency locator transmitter, ELT, is due for battery service during the next year that the annual is valid. That responsibility lies with the aircraft owner. This scenario can be reasonably extended to the AAD and parachute. Generally, however, most riggers refuse to pack the parachute if the battery or unit life cycle expires during the 180-day inspection cycle. Some AAD manufacturers have specific rules regarding battery and repack expiration dates. For example, the manufacturer might mandate that if the battery life expires during the 180-day inspection cycle, then the rigger is not to pack it unless the batteries are replaced or the unit is removed from the assembly. Regarding the 4-year service cycle required for some AADs, there is a 90-day grace period for servicing. If the 180-day inspection cycle expires within that 90-day period, then the rigger may inspect, repack, and re-certify the assembly. If the inspection cycle extends past the 90-day period, then the rigger should not pack the assembly with the AAD. In any case, the rigger should follow the directions of the AAD manufacturer for that particular make and model of AAD. The rigger must make sure to have the latest revision of the packing instructions, as well as any pertinent service bulletins from the manufacturer or airworthiness directives, AD, issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. The rigger may have a set of packing instructions that specifies a certain method for folding the canopy. However, the manufacturer may have changed the method and issued a revision to the manual or a complete new one. If the rigger is not completely sure that he or she has the latest information, then it is time to use the most valuable tool in their inventory, the telephone. A quick call to the manufacturer is all it takes to get the latest information. Most manufacturers publish their service bulletins in hard copy format and on their website. In addition, the Parachute Industry Association, PIA, also has a listing of service bulletins at www.pia.com. It is most important that all riggers make an effort to maintain a comprehensive library of packing instructions and their associated service bulletins. Under Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, 14 CFR, Part 65, Section 65.129e, the certificated rigger may not pack, maintain, or alter a parachute in any manner that deviates from procedures approved by the administrator or the manufacturer of the parachute. In addition, 14 CFR Part 65, Section 65.129f, also states that the certificated rigger may not exercise the privileges of his certificate and type rating unless he understands the current manufacturer's instructions for the operation involved. Component compatibility. Once the rigger has all of the current manuals and information, the inspection can continue. This covers not just the canopy but also the entire assembly. In addition to looking for damage or contamination to the system, the rigger must make sure that all of the component parts are compatible and approved by the manufacturer. Figure 5.2 shows a sample parts list for a typical sport parachute, having dual parachutes in a single harness system, a piggyback. This parts list delineates exactly what parts are used in the assembly of the system. The rigger should check each component part and its identifying label or stamp against the parts list. Mismatched component parts are among the most frequent problems found in the field. Many riggers are under the impression they can freely interchange component parts, but this may be done only within certain limits. Paragraph 11A of Advisory Circular, AC 105-2, Sport Parachute Jumping states, the assembly or mating of approved parachute components from different manufacturers may be made by a certificated and appropriately rated parachute rigger or parachute loft in accordance with the parachute manufacturer's instructions, and without further authorization by the manufacturer or the FAA. Specifically, when various parachute components are interchanged, the parachute rigger should follow the Canopy manufacturer's instructions, as well as the parachute container manufacturer's instructions. However, the container manufacturer's instructions take precedence when there is a conflict between the two. In Figure 5.2, note the bold print at the bottom of the page: no substitution of component parts is authorized. This manufacturer specifically states that you cannot use anything other than original equipment manufacturer, OEM parts. Substituting other parts places the rigger in violation of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR. A common problem found in the field concerns reserve ripcords. Several manufacturers of sport rigs use a 1-pin ripcord with a mini trapezoidal handle and a cable length 27 to 29 inches long. Depending on the actual container it goes into, it is possible to use one manufacturer's ripcord in another container as long as the rigger feels there is sufficient excess cable for safety reasons. However, imagine one ripcord is 27 inches overall and is used in a system that is approved under Technical Standard Order, TSO, C23B and is rated at 300 pounds. Another ripcord is 28 inches overall and is used in a system approved under TSO C23C and is rated at 600 pounds for use with a reserve static line, RSL, installation. The problem here is the mating of different TSO standard components. Installing the first ripcord in the second container with an RSL lanyard may be degrading the safety aspect of the system. So how does the rigger tell which is which? The ripcord approved under TSO C23B has minimal markings, perhaps only a manufacturer's part number. The ripcord approved under TSO C23C has several markings on the handle as required by the TSO. It should have the manufacturer's part number, manufacturer's identification, TSO C23C, and the batch or serial number or date of manufacture. Figure 5.3 In reality, as long as the cable lengths are compatible, the function of the ripcord will probably work. The problem surfaces in the event of a problem or incident involving the system. At this point, the FAA could find the mismatched component and take action against the rigger who packed the parachute. A bigger problem surfaces when the rigger substitutes a reserve deployment bag made by another manufacturer. Most reserve deployment bags are compatible with the appropriate container based on dimensions and volume. If the deployment bag does not fit correctly, there can be a problem with proper functioning of the system. These are two examples of the more common compatibility issues that are regularly found in the field. There are others that the rigger may encounter and need to address as well. The best solution is for the rigger to follow the manufacturer's parts list strictly to ensure the safety of the parachute system. After the rigger has determined that all of the component parts are compatible, he or she can now commence the actual inspection of the parachute assembly. Figure 5.4 shows a typical pilot emergency parachute assembly with a round canopy laid out on the packing table. Make sure the canopy is straight and the apex lines are even. Then apply firm tension to the canopy and lines using a tension board. The standard is to start at the top of the assembly. The assembly shown in Figure 5.4 can be broken down into the following 6 separate areas: 1. Pilot chute and bridle 2. Canopy and deployment device 3. Suspension lines and connector links 4. Container 5. Harness including risers 6. Ripcord inspection/packing checklists allow riggers to track their progress as they do their inspection. Figure 5.5. It is desirable for riggers to complete their inspection uninterrupted, which ensures that the inspection process is followed and nothing gets overlooked. This rarely happens, however, due to normal interruptions, such as phone calls or customer questions. Using the inspection checklist ensures that after an interruption, the rigger is able to continue at the proper spot without missing anything. This checklist is divided into 7 sections that make it usable for all types of parachute assemblies. It includes an area for counting the tools at the beginning and end of the inspection and packing procedure. This ensures that no tools are overlooked or left in the parachute. While this may sound implausible to some, it has happened over the years, sometimes with fatal consequences. Round canopies and pilot emergency systems. The first thing the rigger should check is the continuity of the canopy to make sure it is straight. Do so by laying the system on the table as if the wearer were laying face down, head toward the canopy. On some models, such as military seat parachutes, it may be face down with the feet towards the canopy. Make sure to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Ensure that the canopy is right side out, i.e., the data panel faces out, and the gore numbers are readable on the outside. Attach the required tension devices and apply light tension. Standing at the canopy, split the riser line groups and grasp the 2 gores that separate them. The top panel should have line number 1 and the last line of the sequence depending on the number of lines on the canopy. Starting with number 1, the lines will run in sequence counterclockwise around the canopy. Figure 5.6, the 4 lines attached to these 2 gores comprise the standard 4-line check for a round canopy. By running these 4 lines from the canopy to the connector links, the rigger can make a quick check of straightness. If the rigger was the last person to pack the parachute, he or she may feel this is sufficient to ensure continuity. However, most riggers do a full check of all the lines, even on their own pack jobs. Straightening the canopy. If a rigger finds lines out of sequence or the canopy is inside out, it becomes necessary to remove any twists, tangles, or turns. There are 2 things to remember when encountering this situation. First, if the parachute was originally straight and the entanglement occurred from handling, it is possible to untangle the parachute without disconnecting anything. Second, if the parachute was assembled incorrectly in the first place, it is virtually impossible to straighten it without disassembling it. These 2 scenarios become particularly acute when the rigger has brought a parachute for repacking and it was assembled incorrectly. At first, the rigger assumes it to be correct, but when a correct continuity cannot be done, it becomes very frustrating, and the rigger may spend an excessive amount of time trying to straighten the canopy. The rigger should always start at the top or apex end of the canopy. Make sure that the top gore with the data panel is facing up. Follow the gore to the apex so that the upper lateral band is on the outside. Attach the apex to the upper tension device. Next, flake the gores in sequence to see if the canopy is straight. Split the canopy so the left and right line groups are separate at the skirt of the canopy. Figure 5.7, pick up the 2 center gores and grasp the 4 lines. Figure 5.8, these are line number 1 and the last line of the sequence. Run these lines down toward the risers and or container. On most canopies, these lines run to the inside, top connector link of a 4-link system or to the inside of a 2-link system. Figure 5.9, if these lines are correct, continue the checking of the line continuity. If the lines are not straight, release the risers from the harness, if possible. If not, take one of the 2 top lines and untangle it until the line runs straight back to the canopy without going around any of the other lines. Untangle the risers and harness/container until the rest of the lines are straight. Repeat with the other riser, if applicable. Attach the rest of the connector links to the tension device and do a thorough continuity check from the canopy to the connector links. If the lines were incorrectly assembled, disconnect the link from the riser, remove the lines, and reinstall them onto the connector link in the correct order. Reinstall the connector link to the riser. Check the entire canopy for correct continuity. Make sure the connector link is tightened properly. Damage identification. During the inspection process, the rigger may identify various discrepancies in the materials and/or the assemblies. While the following inspection processes call out what to look for, the specific descriptions and treatment of the damage are provided in Chapter 7, Repairs, Alterations, and Manufacture. Pilot chute and bridle 1. Check the spring shape and tension. It should not have an excessive bend to the length of the spring. There should be no kinks in the wire or sharp edges or burrs. The swages should be smooth and tight. Check the tension of the spring against the manufacturer's specifications. Most current springs have between 20 to 30 pounds of tension, but some run as high as 40 to 45 pounds. Too strong a spring is rarely an issue, but too weak often is a problem. Some manufacturers specify a testing method and frequency of testing. 2. Check the canopy cap for security to the canopy portion along the stitching and seams. If it has a grommet in the cap or an alignment strap, check the grommets for tightness and smooth edges on the inside. Sharp edges can cut the locking loop. Check the alignment strap for centering and tacking. 3. Check the canopy fabric for any holes, burns, stains, or other damage. Check the seams for loose stitching and look over the mesh portion, if used. Small holes may be allowed, but consult the manufacturer's manual. Check the attachment loop at the base of the pilot chute for security. Check any hand tacking, if used, to secure the spring to the base of the pilot chute. 4. If the parachute uses a sewn-on bridle, check the stitching. If it is a tied-on model, check the knots and any hand tacking called out in the instructions. Be sure to check the length against the parts list. Make sure the canopy end of the bridle is looped around the apex lines and not around a tension loop. If a floating loop is called out, make sure the locator tacking is secure. Reserve canopy if available. Use a canopy damage chart appropriate to the canopy for documenting your inspection for repair of any damage found. Figure 5.10 shows a typical chart for round canopies. 1. Check the apex lines for damage and continuity, as well as the upper lateral band. If there is a tension loop, make sure it is secure. If there is a vent collar ring, check the elasticity of the material. 2. Inspect gores and panel fabrics by starting at the top center gore of the canopy, working your way up one gore while inspecting the fabric, seams, tapes, and lines. When you reach the apex, pull the next radial seam toward you, stretching out the fabric, and work your way down the gore to the lower lateral band. Figure 511, this method is the most efficient use of your time and physical efforts. Work your way around the canopy, inspecting each gore from top to bottom. 3. The manufacturer may call for the tensile testing of the fabric after inspection of the canopy for obvious visual damage. This is very important because there was a fabric deterioration problem with certain parachutes several years ago. An AD was issued, and while the exact cause was never determined, a side benefit was the development and adoption of a non-destructive fabric pull test method. This method was adopted by the PIA as technical standard, TS-108, parachute canopy fabric pull test, non-destructive method. This method of testing canopy fabric for strength has been adopted by several canopy manufacturers as suitable for testing their canopies. However, the rigger must be careful in using this test method. The proper equipment is essential for accurate testing, and the type of material must be known in order to test to the correct strength. The testing equipment is shown in Figure 512. The full standard can be found in Appendix I of this handbook. 4. Along with the pull test, the AD also requires testing the canopy mesh with a solution of bromo-cresol green indicator to determine the presence of an acid condition. The bromo-cresol green indicator is a dark blue liquid in its standard state. It turns yellow when it contacts acid. The stronger the acid, the brighter the yellow. If the test is positive, the canopy needs to be treated to neutralize the condition. The AD highlights the manufacturer's service bulletin as to how to comply with this test and procedure. 5. If the canopy has a deployment device, such as a diaper, check that it is securely attached, particularly after use. Check the grommets, line stow bands, elastics, or other line stow devices. Pay particular attention to where the stitching attaches to the canopy fabric. This area can be particularly prone to damage during opening. Suspension lines and connector links. 1. The lines, their attachment points, and the associated stitching should be checked for damage or missing stitches. With the older sheath and core nylon lines, such as Type 3 found on military surplus canopies, the zigzag stitching at the links are prone to raveling. The more modern non-continuous line canopies use Dacron or nylon braided lines. The common attachment at the links for these lines uses the finger trap method to secure the lines to the link with a bar tack securing the lines. Most manufacturers now use a contrasting color thread for the bar tack in order to make inspection easier. Make sure all bar tacks are in place. Figure 513 shows both methods of line attachment to the links. 2. There are 3 basic types of separable connector links in common use today for round canopies: the standard L-bar type, MS-20 2002, the Navy Speed Link, MS-20 2021, and the Quick Link, commonly called the Mail and Repeat Link, named after the French company that first manufactured them. Figure 514, the older military surplus canopies are usually found with the 2 types of mil-spec connector links. Modern sport canopies usually are found with the repeat links because of their compatibility with the modern, low-bulk suspension lines. 3. With the mil-spec links, check the tightness of the screws that hold the links together. With the speed links, make sure the knurled side of the end cap is facing up and the plates face outboard on the riser. The screw should be checked for tightness at each repack. 4. If the canopy is equipped with repeat links, they should be oriented on the riser with the barrel inboard and to the bottom so it tightens upward. The link should be tightened hand tight, then approximately 1/4 turn further. The actual force recommended for a number 5 link is approximately 30 inch-pounds. Most riggers do not possess the force gauge to measure this, so they use the quarter-turn guide. After tightening the links, a telltale should be applied to the barrel. Figure 515, a telltale is a marker, usually nail polish, that provides a breakable seal to show if the barrel has moved. If the seal is broken, the rigger knows the link may be loose. In doing a repack, if the telltale is intact, the rigger should not loosen the link and re-tighten it because continual tightening can strip the threads, causing the link to fail. Harness 1. Starting at the riser end, check the webbing for any wear or damage and inspect the stitching at the riser ends. If the canopy has steering lines and a guide ring on the riser, make sure the ring is secure and the steering line is attached to the steering toggle correctly. With a round canopy, make sure the steering line has sufficient slack in it when under tension. If the line is too tight, it can fail at opening because of too much stretch. 2. Continue down the risers. If canopy releases are installed, check their operation. With the Capewell cable release, open the release and make sure there is no dirt or sand in the mechanism. Also, check for wear, particularly on the cable ring. 3. Check all of the harness webbing for wear from chafing, abrasion, and sunlight degradation. Pay particular attention to the buffer and chafing strips were used to prevent wear from the hardware. These buffers are there to provide early warning before the load-bearing webbing starts to wear. Check the elastic keepers so the running ends of the straps can be properly stowed. 4. Check all of the hardware, paying particular attention to the leg snaps. Quick ejectors are particularly prone to failure of the springs. Obviously, those with broken springs should be replaced. V12 snaps are prone to having the gate sides bent to the point they do not close properly. This gate may be repaired with a screwdriver and pliers. Figure 5.16, straightening the side of the gate allows the snap to close properly. 5. An area of concern for many riggers, one for which there is not much guidance, is how much plating wear and associated corrosion of the hardware is allowable. This depends on the location of the damage. If it is a solid ring or buckle, and the damage has occurred from dragging or abrasion in an area that is not in contact with webbing, one solution is to clean the rust with a fine emery cloth and cover it with clear nail polish. This keeps the area from continued rusting. It does not, however, prevent further damage caused by the original rusting. If the rusting is caused by two pieces of hardware interacting with each other, the problem is more serious. If allowed to continue, the rust pattern may cause the two pieces to fuse together under the most severe conditions. In this case, the hardware must be removed and replaced. If the hardware in contact with webbing, such as a leg strap adapter, and becomes corroded, it must be replaced. This problem frequently arises when the parachute is exposed to salt water and not properly rinsed. The hardware rusts inside the leg strap webbing, causing accelerated wear and must definitely be replaced. Figure 5.17.6. The ripcord housing and pocket should be checked for wear and fit of the ripcord. On the housing, check the ends and the ferrules. On more modern assemblies, these ferrules are brass and more susceptible to wear than the mil-spec types. Look inside to make sure there are no obstructions to interfere with the ripcord. The ripcord pocket may be elastic, velcro, or a military style with a spring to hold in the ripcord. Whichever type, make sure the ripcord is held securely, yet at the same time make sure it is not too tight so the ripcord can be removed easily. Also, check the tackings that hold the housing and pocket. Container 1. As stated in the beginning of this chapter, the initial external inspection of the container should alert the rigger to any damage inside. Note any holes, abrasion, or fraying of the pack material. 2. Check the grommets for sharp edges and pulling out of the material from under the grommet. Cones should have the stitching secure. Check the plating on the cones in the area of the eye. Sharp edges can cause a cone lock. Eyelets should have the tacking secure. Snap fasteners should be securely set in the material. Check for wear and security of the opposing parts. Make sure that pull-the-dot types are set correctly for direction. Stiffeners, both metal and plastic, should not be bent or cracked. There should be no sharp edges. Pack opening bands, POBs, if used, should be in good shape and not stretched out. Make sure the hooks are in good shape too. On the military-style POBs, it may be necessary to retack the pull tabs at the end. Metal frames, if used, should be straight. Buffers at the corners should be in good condition. Tackings, if used, should be secure. 3. The container closing loop is an extremely important part of the container system. A worn loop may fail, which would cause a premature opening of the container. With the parachute still in a packed condition, check for the correct length. If the loop is made too long or stretched during use, the pilot chute can extend and move off center. This may result in a poor launch or a pack job that is uncomfortable for the user. After determining that the loop is of the correct material and length, check the eyes of the loop on the inside for wear. It is not uncommon for the loop to appear to be in good condition when viewed from the outside but worn partially through when examined from the inside. Figure 5.18. Many riggers simply replace the loops at each repack, regardless of the condition. Ripcord. There are a number of things that need to be inspected to approve the ripcord. 1. Check the pins for straightness, smoothness, cracks, or other damage. 2. Check the cable for fraying, kinks, or severe bends. 3. Check the swage for wear and security. Look for signs of movement on the cable. 4. Check the handle for wear, damage, rust, or abuse. Any damage or discrepancies found during the inspection should be noted and the appropriate repair performed by a certificated and appropriately rated rigger according to the manufacturer's instructions or approved manuals. Airing and drying. During the inspection process, the rigger must determine the condition of the canopy and system regarding dryness and moisture. In the past, it was necessary for the parachute to be aired and dried for 24 hours prior to packing it. According to 14 CFR Part 65, Section 65.129c, no certificated parachute rigger may pack a parachute that has not been thoroughly dried and aired. This determination is at the discretion of the rigger. Ram air reserves and sport piggyback systems. The following inspection procedures share much with the previous section on round canopies. The differences between ram air reserves and sport piggyback systems are identified in the following section. Inspect as follows: pilot chute and free bag/bridle 1. The rigger should inspect the pilot chute in the same manner as in the section on round canopies. 2. The free bags should be checked to include all grommets, especially those bags that have a through loop configuration. Any sharpness in this area can result in a damaged closing loop. For those free bags that utilize a safety stow locking system, make sure the elastic loop is of the correct size, the elastic is in good shape, and the zigzag stitching is secure. Many riggers fabricate these loops in the field, which in most cases is an unauthorized procedure. The safety stow loop is an integral part of the approved reserve deployment system, and is manufactured under an approved quality control system from approved materials. The rigger should use only OEM-approved parts for this. 3. Check the bridle for any damage or wear. For those bridles that have assister pockets, make sure the stitching is secure and the pockets are not damaged. Check the velcro on the line stow pocket for wear and security. If the velcro does not hold securely, the parachute can experience line dump during deployment, possibly causing a malfunction or out-of-sequence deployment. Some deployment bags use rubber bands to stow the lines. If this is the case, check their condition and replace them if necessary. 4. There are still older ram air canopies in the field that did not use a free bag but a diaper deployment system. If this is the case, the diaper should be inspected the same as that on a round canopy. Be sure to use the correct type and length of bridle, since it is generally not the same as a round bridle. Ram air reserve canopy shown in Figure 519 is a typical ram air reserve and harness and container system layout. The terminology used in describing the parts of the ram air canopy is called out in PIA Technical Standard TS100, Standardized Nomenclature for Ram Air Inflated Gliding Parachutes, which can be found in Appendix I of this handbook. 1. When inspecting and assembling ram air canopies, begin with the upper surface of the canopy. Figure 520, work your way up and down the top panel of the cells looking for any damage or contamination. Check the seams for loose stitching and packing tabs if used, for security. 2. Check the trailing edge seam for secure stitching, paying particular attention to the line attachment tapes and their associated bar tacks. Next, look at the interior of the cells, carefully checking the crossboards for damage or fraying of the edges of the fabric. 3. Now proceed to the lower surface of the canopy. Carefully check all the seams in the line attachment tapes and bar tacks. 4. Some manufacturers require the use of PIA Technical Standard TS108, canopy fabric pull test, at certain intervals. In addition, the manufacturer's warning/TSO label may require that the rigger mark the label to signify each time it is repacked and after each use. Figure 521, this label is found on the upper surface trailing edge of the canopy. It is important to comply with this requirement, not only because the manufacturer requires it, but also it establishes the trail of use for the canopy, which allows future riggers, and the manufacturer, to track its use and condition over time. Some riggers feel that they are doing their customers a favor by not marking the boxes in order to show it has little use when it comes to selling it. Since most individuals have a specific rigger pack their parachute on a regular basis, it does not take a lot of detective work to inspect the rigger's logbook to see how many times they have packed any particular parachute. Canopy assembly and line continuity. The first task is to check the line continuity of the canopy. The following method may be used by riggers who do not have access to a canopy hanger. Figure 522 shows examples of a 7-cell and 9-cell canopy when viewed from the bottom as by the jumper when in flight. The examples show the line attachment nomenclature referred to in the continuity check. Figure 523 shows the standard canopy nomenclature as referred to in the continuity check. 1. First, lay out the canopy on its left side, the slider spanwise with its tape down, and lay out the container with the harness up. 2. If slider bumpers are used, thread one bumper over each riser and down a few inches. 3. Place the slider on the riser spanwise with its tape facing the canopy. 4. Locate the leading edge and A-line attachment. Follow the line 8A, 10A to the outboard side of its link and attach the link to the right riser, finger tight. 5. Pick up line 1A at the canopy attach point. Follow it down to the outboard side of its link and attach the link to the left front riser, finger tight. 6. Turn the container over, harness down, and orient the rear risers to receive their respective links. This simplifies CD link attachment. 7. Rotate the leading edge under the rest of the canopy. Split the aft section along with its associated control line groups to make the CD links easily accessible for routing and installation. 8. Locate the data panel at the center cell's upper surface trailing edge. From this center reference point, follow the trailing edge to the left stabilizer and pick up line 1D. 9. Route this line to the outboard side of its link and attach the link to the left rear riser, finger tight. 10. Again from the center reference, follow the trailing edge to the right stabilizer and pick up line 8D 10D. 11. Route this line to the outboard side of its link and attach the link to the right rear riser, finger tight. 12. Return to the center reference point of the trailing edge. Locate and pick up the left side upper control lines consecutively. Verify their continuity to the junction with the lower control line. 13. Removing twists as you go, follow the left lower control line to its running end. Route it through the appropriate slider grommet and then through the guide ring. 14. Remove the toggle from the riser and route the running end of the lower control line through the toggle attachment loop or grommet. 15. Slide the toggle up to the mark on the control line. Secure it with an overhand knot tied closely to the toggle. 16. The control line attachment for the right side is done in a similar manner. 17. When the control line installation is complete, compare the two toggle settings under equal tension to ensure their uniformity. 18. At this time, verify the continuity of the control line system. Begin at the trailing edge on each side, ensuring that all twists have been removed from the upper and lower control lines. Check that the lower control lines have been properly routed through their appropriate slider grommets, and that the toggles have been properly secured equidistant from the trailing edge. 19. Separate the aft section and control line groups to their respective sides and locate the center reference point at the trailing edge. 20. Following the trailing edge control surface outboard leads the rigger to the left stabilizer's bottom seam and the attachment point of line 1D. 21. Holding D lines 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in your right hand and in D lines 5, 6, 7, and 8, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in your left hand. Verify the continuity of the C and D lines through the cascades to their respective rear risers. 22. Gather in the control lines and flip the canopy over so the leading edge faces up. Verify this orientation by locating the attachment points of A lines 1 and A10. 23. In the same direction you flip the canopy, rotate the container system harness up. 24. Pick up the front riser groups, follow them to the canopy, and separate. 25. Pick up A lines 8, 7, 6, and 5, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. If you have continuous center cell lines, follow the bottom seam down and pick up line 5B, 6B. Verify continuity of the A and B lines, through the cascades, to the right front riser. 26. Pick up A lines 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. If you have continuous center cell lines, follow the bottom seam down and pick up line 4B, 5B. Verify continuity through the cascades to the left front riser. The continuity check is now complete. 27. Tighten the connector links with an appropriate size wrench. Do not over-tighten. Inspect the links for any marks or damage possibly done during the tightening process. Mark the barrel of the connector links with a telltale mark. 28. Move the slider upward from the risers onto the suspension lines. 29. Move the slider bumpers upwards and into position over the connector links. Hand tack the bumpers in place according to the type used. Inspection 1. Starting at the lower surface of the canopy, check the line attachment loops and their associated bar tacks. Follow the line downward to the cascade junction, if applicable, and check the bar tack at this location. Continue down the line to the connector links and check the bottom loop and bar tack. 2. Starting at the top and working your way downward, inspect the steering lines. Check all junctions and bar tacks, paying particular attention to the brake loops. Check the security of the steering toggles to ensure the correct attachment method is followed. If the toggles are improperly tied, they may come off when the jumper deploys the brakes. Make sure the toggle matches the size of the brake loops. If they are too large, they may hang up and not release when needed. For compatibility, the toggles should be those supplied with the harness and container. 3. If repeat links are used on the canopy, check them as set forth in the section on round canopies. The link orientation and tightness is the same. Some canopy manufacturers provide and prescribe the use of slider bumpers with their canopies. These are made from either webbing or from vinyl or rubber tubing and are designed to protect the grommets of the slider from impacting the connector links during deployment. If these bumpers are used, It is recommended that they be tacked in such a manner that they cannot slide up the lines and interfere with the slider during deployment. Figure 524-4. A type of connector link, called the soft link, is used with certain reserve canopies. Figure 525, manufactured from spectral line, they loop through the bottom of the suspension line and the end of the reserve riser. The strength of these soft links far exceeds that of the metal links when installed properly. If installed on the reserve, the rigger should have the manufacturer's instructions to ensure the correct installation. Harness 1. When inspecting the harness, start at the riser end, checking the condition of the webbing and stitching. Pay particular attention to the security of the steering line guide rings and the method of stowing the excess steering line. If these guide rings fail, it can result in fatal consequences to the user. 2. Check all of the hardware on the harness in the same manner detailed in the pilot emergency parachute section in this chapter. 3. Check the canopy release system for wear and operation. The release in almost universal use today is the 3-ring release system. Figure 526. With this system, it is imperative that the rigger also checks the release cable housings for security and cleanliness. Without proper maintenance, this system can be subject to hard pull forces and the inability to release properly. Since the successful operation of the reserve deployment is somewhat dependent on cleanly releasing the main, a properly operating release system is necessary. The primary areas for inspection are the release locator velcro on the harness and the cable housings. Check the housing ends for sharp edges on the inside of the grommets. If the housings are tacked to the harness, make sure these are secure. If the customer did not bring the main canopy with the reserve, the rigger should encourage the customer to at least bring the 3-ring release handle in for inspection and service. Container. In addition to those container areas referenced under the pilot emergency system, the Sport Piggyback container has features unique to this configuration. 1. Check the installation of the AAD if one is installed, making sure the stowage pockets, cutter mounts, and control unit are secure. Check that the cables are routed correctly. If they are exposed, they may get snagged during packing and damaged or disconnected. Upon completion, inspect the condition of the closing loop. 2. Check the RSL. The RSL is not considered part of the certified reserve system, but if it is installed, the rigger is responsible for the entire RSL assembly since it is attached to the ripcord handle, cable, or housing. This includes the cable housings for tacking and security, any guide rings used, and the RSL lanyard itself. Check the release or snap shackle, if used, and any velcro or other positioning or locating methods. An area frequently overlooked is the RSL attachment ring on the main risers, which are frequently replaced. Figure 527. In many cases, the attachment ring does not match up to the original design. The rigger should inspect the release handle for proper cable lengths. If the design has only one riser attached to the RSL, it is imperative that the cables be trimmed to release the side opposite the lanyard first so that the reserve is not deployed before the risers are separated from the harness. 3. Check the main deployment system, of which there are 3 basic types in use today. The first is a ripcord similar to the pilot emergency system. The second type is the throw-out pilot chute, TOP. The third is the pull-out pilot chute, POP. Next, inspect the main ripcord system. Check the ripcord and main pilot chute the same as with the pilot emergency system. Inspect the ripcord pocket for proper holding of the ripcord handle. For throw-out pilot chutes, inspect the pilot chute fabric and mesh for holes. Check the top handle at the top of the pilot chute for security, paying special attention to the tape holding the handle, which is particularly prone to wear. Check the bridle attachment to the pilot chute. If it is of a centerline collapsible design, check the centerline for wear and stretch and make sure the length of the bridle is correct. Check the curved locking pin for wear or damage as well as the tape, which attaches it to the bridle. Figure 528. Check the pilot chute pocket for fit and wear. Most of today's installations are what is known as a bottom of container (BOC) configuration. It is particularly important that the elastic material from which the pocket is made is in good condition. A loose pocket can result in a premature deployment of the main parachute. If repacking a pull-out parachute, check the pilot chute and bridle in the same manner of the throw-out parachute inspection. Check the lanyard and handle for wear. 4. If Velcro is used on the main pin protector flap, be sure to inspect its condition. If a plastic closing flap or tongue is used, check for deformation or breakage. Figure 529-5. If Velcro is used on the main riser covers, be sure to check its condition. If plastic, check for breakage and deformation. If the plastic is excessively deformed, it is a sign that the covers do not fit properly and may open prematurely causing problems. 6. For the container closing loop, The same criteria applies as in the pilot emergency parachute. In addition, make sure the loop material is the same as specified in the owner's manual, especially if an AAD is installed. With certain AADs, a particular type of knot and washer to be used is specified as well. Ripcord all the areas mentioned in the pilot emergency parachute section apply to the sport rig. In addition, some assemblies utilize a ripcord that has a webbing loop handle or a pillow type handle similar to the 3-ring release handle. Figure 530. It is important that the rigger check these handles for proper markings and fit to the assembly. Make sure that there is sufficient slack in the cable to allow no loading of the pin in any attitude or position that the wearer may conceivably get into. Most, if not all of these style handles, utilize velcro to secure them to the harness. Make sure the velcro is in good condition for holding ability but not so much as to inhibit the pull force. Remember, while both the pilot emergency parachute and sport piggyback assembly share many areas in common, each has peculiar requirements for its use. It is important for the rigger to recognize these and handle each system accordingly. Rigging and repairs. When the entire assembly inspection is complete, the rigger has a list of the discrepancies found during the procedure. At this point, a determination must be made on how to remedy these defects. For senior riggers, certain remedial action may be outside the scope of their certificate. If so, those riggers need to find an appropriately certificated and rated rigger to do the work or return the parachute to the manufacturer for repair. In the case of major canopy or harness work, this may be the best solution regardless. Aside from the qualification limitations of the rigger, the manufacturer may be better equipped to perform major repair or overhaul. They have the original patterns, templates, and design data, as well as the certified materials. In addition, their labor rate is probably less than what the rigger may charge the customer, particularly if he or she has not done this repair before. The factory has the experience and practice that results in the repair looking just like new. While some riggers may look at any given project with anticipation, they also need to look at what is best for the customer. Many times, the master rigger has a repair facility and stocks it with the necessary materials. In most cases, these materials come from sources with no traceability as to their origin. The manufacturer is required to use only those materials that have been tested, certified, and approved to meet the standards of their quality control system under the TSO system. During one recent routine inspection and repack, the rigger found severe failure of the harness stitching at the main lift web/leg strap junction. Upon further examination, it was determined that the thread used to sew the harness was not nylon. The harness was returned to the manufacturer, who then determined that the thread was indeed cotton and not the required nylon. The thread broke at approximately 10 pounds versus 45 pounds for 5-cord nylon. Further investigation revealed that the harness was originally manufactured with a harness size 3 inches shorter. There were telltale marks left from where the original harness was stitched. This modification was evidently performed by someone who either was not qualified to perform the work or had gotten a batch of the wrong thread by mistake and did not recognize the difference. Attempts to find out who did the alteration were unsuccessful. The manufacturer repaired the harness at no charge and returned it to the customer. To preclude this type of problem, many professional riggers and lofts establish good working relationships with the manufacturers and procure certain materials from them. They keep these marked and in a separate area and use them only on the appropriate projects. Another area of concern is a master rigger who does major alterations without proper approval of the manufacturer. The rigger may do major repairs to return the assembly to its original condition without further authorization of the administrator or manufacturer, but alterations are another story. Title 14 CFR Part 65, Section 65.129e, states that no certificated parachute rigger may pack, maintain, or alter a parachute in any manner that deviates from the procedures approved by the administrator or the manufacturer of the parachute. There are a number of common alterations seen in the field. Among them are harness resizing, AAD installations, RSL retrofits, chest strap relocation, and others. The manufacturer's approval can vary from a verbal message over the phone to a formal engineering procedure complete with drawings and specifications. If the work is done correctly, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. If riggers want to ensure they are following code, they should obtain some form of written approval from the manufacturer in whatever form they provide. The bottom line is that the purpose of the system is to provide an infrastructure that ensures the safety of the public. Professional riggers strive to do the right thing both morally and legally. Packing is the heart of the rigging profession. Once riggers satisfy all the necessary inspection requirements, they may then proceed with the packing process. This section describes a generic round parachute packing method into a modern back-type pilot emergency system. The steps for doing this are common to most parachutes of similar types. Once the basics are mastered, It is a simple matter of following the manufacturer's instructions for other makes and models. Round canopy into a pilot emergency parachute system. The steps for packing this type of parachute are broken down into the following sections. 1. Layout. 2. Flaking and pleating the canopy. 3. Folding the skirt and the long fold. 4. Closing the diaper and stowing the lines. 5. Skirt or diaper placement. 6. Accordion fold of the canopy into the container. 7. Closing the container. Before beginning, the rigger must have the necessary tools to pack the parachute. The packing manual includes a list of tools necessary for the procedure. Figure 531 shows the recommended tools needed to pack the parachute described in this section. Do not forget to count your tools before beginning. Layout. 1. The parachute must be positioned on the table face down with the wearer's head toward the canopy. The rear of the canopy faces up. Normally the data panel is on the middle gore that faces up. Figure 532. 2. Attach the canopy tension loop to the upper table tension device, then attach the connector links or risers to a tension board or similar device at the bottom of the table. Figure 533, be sure to apply light tension. 3. Straighten the apex of the canopy, making sure the lower lateral band or skirt is somewhat even. Figure 534, apply additional tension to the canopy and lines. Pleating the canopy. 1. Flake the canopy in the normal manner with an equal number of gores to each side. Figures 5 to 35 through 5 to 41 show the proper technique. 2. Pleat the canopy with an equal number of gores to each side. Make sure the canopy skirt is even. Figures 5 to 42 through 5 to 44, fold the skirt. 1. Fold the skirt so it is parallel to the radial seams. Figure 545. 2. Fold the canopy lengthwise in thirds, and then fold once more to the center in what is commonly called fifths. Figures 5 to 46 through 5 to 48, place packing weights on the canopy to hold it in place. Closing the diaper and stowing the lines. 1. Pull the container towards the canopy and form a loop of suspension lines above the top of the diaper. Figure 549, be sure to leave enough room to close the diaper. 2. Close the diaper starting with the top grommet. Lock the grommet with a bite of line no more than 1.5 inches long. Figure 550, close the middle grommet in the same manner. Figure 551, 3. Close the bottom grommet over the bottom rubber band and then the end flap grommet over the side grommet. Figure 552, close with a bite of line no longer than 1.5 inches long. 4. Finish stowing the remainder of the suspension lines using bites no more than 1.5 inches long. Figure 553, skirt or diaper placement. 1. Lay the risers in the container and close the riser covers. Insert pull-up cords into both ends of the closing loop. 2. Turn the skirt of the canopy 90 degrees and lay one edge of the diaper even with the top edge and inside the pack tray. Figure 554. Accordion folding the canopy. 1. Fold the canopy toward the bottom of the container, leaving enough to fill the upper corner of the container. 2. Fold the canopy toward the bottom of the container and leave approximately 4 inches of canopy past the bottom. Figure 555. 3. Fold the canopy back towards the top of the container and spread the canopy sideways to fill out the width of the container. Figure 556, make 2 folds between the lower edge of the diaper and the lower end of the closing loop. Figure 557. 4. Lay the remainder of the canopy and apex across the middle of the container and fold in an appropriate manner to fill the empty area of the container on the pack tray stiffener below the diaper. Figure 558, closing the container. 1. Close the bottom flap of the container first, threading the pull-up cord through the grommet at the upper end of the bottom flap. Place the canopy protector flaps into position as shown in Figure 559. 2. Close the top flap, being sure to push the canopy and diaper into the corners of the container while closing. Thread the upper pull-up cord through the upper grommet on the top flap. 3. Thread the lower pull-up cord through the lower grommet on the top flap, making sure the canopy protector flaps are in position. Figure 560, pull the lower pull-up cord through both grommets until the closing loop appears and install a temporary pin. 4. Pull the upper pull-up cord through the grommet until the upper closing loop appears and install a temporary pin. Figure 561. 5. Compress the pilot chute between the rubber bumpers and make sure the pilot chute canopy fabric is tucked into the coils of the spring. Thread the pull-up cords through the grommets in the grommet strap. Removing one temporary pin at a time, pull up the closing loops and secure the pilot chute in place with 2 temporary pins. Figure 562, close the velcro on the top and bottom flaps. 6. Close the right side flap. Close the left side flap and install the ripcord pins. Figure 563. 7. Seal the last pin according to the manufacturer's instructions or in an approved manner. Ripcord pull force. The correct packing is the most important aspect of repacking a parachute, but the cosmetic appearance of the container is important as well. This is true both for a pilot emergency and a sport piggyback system. Pilots want their parachute as snug and as flat as possible to keep the parachute comfortable when in use. Skydivers want theirs as snug and streamlined as possible so it stays closed during free fall. The key to these requirements is to make sure the pilot chute is held down securely. To do that, the closing loop needs to be as short as the rigger can make it and still meet the requirements for the maximum pull force. Under the TSO system, the maximum allowable pull force for the ripcord is 22 pounds. Most riggers develop a feel for the closing of the container and the resultant force. However, new riggers need to check their packing technique to measure the pull force, which is done without a seal or thread. Start by having someone put on the parachute to replicate the real shape and conformity of the parachute system. To pull the ripcord while the parachute is lying on the table is not realistic. The rigger then takes the ripcord handle from the pocket and attaches a calibrated scale to it. Figure 564, ideally, a recording scale should be used to register the maximum force during the pull. Next, the rigger needs to pull the ripcord in a smooth, quick motion, duplicating the motion of the user and the test requirements of the TSO. Take note of the force required to pull the ripcord pins clear of the locking loops and activate the system. If the force is less than 22 pounds, the rigger can then reclose the container and seal the ripcord. If the force is over 22 pounds, the rigger must make whatever adjustments are needed, such as lengthening the locking loop or re-stowing the canopy, to achieve a pull force below 22 pounds. Sealing the parachute is stated in 14 CFR Part 65, Section 65.133. Each certificated parachute rigger must have a seal with an identifying mark prescribed by the administrator, and a seal press. After packing a parachute, he shall seal the pack with his seal in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendation for that type of parachute. Most manuals simply say to seal the parachute. The following describes a commonly approved method. Take a length of seal thread approximately 20 inches long. Fold in half and make 2 lark's head knots around the ripcord cable adjacent to the shank of the ripcord pin. Figure 565, pass one end of the thread through the seal and then under the pin on the opposite side of the locking loop or cone. Figure 566, bring the end back through the second hole in the seal and tie a knot with the other end of the thread. Figure 567, leave enough slack in the thread to allow for movement of the pin without breaking the thread. However, make sure the pin cannot be extracted from the locking loop without breaking the thread. Slide the seal over the knot and compress the seal with the seal press. Figure 568, trim the excess thread. Count all of your tools. Fill in the appropriate information on the packing data card and the rigger's logbook. Place the data card in the packing data card pocket. Ram air reserve into a sport piggyback system. In the preceding text, the discussion is centered on a parachute system that was already assembled. This next section focuses on the assembly of a ram air parachute system, the component parts, and the process from the assembly stage through to packing. While this section provides guidance and an overview of packing a ram air canopy into a sport piggyback system, it is imperative that the rigger receive proper training from a certificated and properly rated rigger who has been trained to pack ram air reserves. Title 14 CFR Part 65, Section 65.129F states, no certificated parachute rigger may exercise the privileges of his certificate and type rating unless he understands the current manufacturer's instructions for the operation involved. The following procedure is typical of many current one-pin container systems. While this configuration comprises the majority of those manufactured today, there are other designs still in use that require different techniques. The rigger must become thoroughly familiar with the other configurations before attempting to assemble and pack these systems. Assembling the reserve system. The following components are necessary to assemble the harness and container to the ram air reserve. 1. The harness, container, and associated parts to include the reserve pilot chute and free bag, reserve ripcord, reserve steering toggles, reserve closing loop, and RSL, if desired. 2. Reserve canopy. 3. AAD, if desired. Before progressing, the necessary tools must be available. The packing manual should include a recommended tools list. However, based on the rigger's experience and packing technique, the numbers and types of tools needed to pack this system may vary. Figure 569 shows the tools needed to pack the following ram air parachute assembly using the technique described. Before starting, always count your tools and then follow the assembly procedures listed below. 1. Connect the canopy to the risers of the harness, ensuring line continuity is correct. 2. Tighten the connector links and seal with a telltale mark. 3. If used, install and secure the connector link bumpers per the canopy manufacturer's instructions. 4. Route the control lines through the slider grommets and guide rings on the rear of the riser. Fasten the steering toggles in the required manner. Figure 575. Install the AAD if desired, according to the manufacturer's instructions. 6. Install a closing loop of the correct type and length. 7. Attach the reserve-free bag to the reserve pilot chute. The following steps should be used for packing this type of parachute. 1. Layout and setting up packing clamps. 2. Stacking and pleating the reserve canopy. 3. Setting the deployment brakes. 4. Folding the canopy. 5. Placing the canopy into the deployment bag and stowing the lines. 6. Placing the bag into the container and closing the container. Step 1. Layout and setting up packing clamps. 1. Anchor the risers at the connector links including the steering lines. Figure 571. 2. Place packing weight on top of it. 3. Pull the slider down to the connector links. Make sure the tapes face upward toward the canopy. Figure 572. 4. Lay the canopy on its right side. Note, a mirror image of the layout is permissible. 5. Flake the canopy so the top seams are even. Place a clamp on the top of the canopy in line with each line attachment point as in Figure 573. Step 2. Stacking and pleating the reserve canopy. Note, the canopy stack should look like Figure 574. It is imperative that the rigger maintains control over the packing process at all times. In particular, it is important to keep the lines taut and straight and to keep the center wind channel of the canopy stack clear and the line attachment tabs stacked neatly. 2. Fold half under a lines. Figures 5 to 76 and 5 to 77. 3. Pick up the B lines by the clamp and hold vertically over the A clamp. Figure 578. Note the spread of the leading edge panels. 4. Lower the B clamp and material down to the A clamp. Figure 579. Spread the cells equally to both sides. Keep the center cell in the middle. 5. Repeat this step with the C and the D line groups. Figures 5 to 80 and 5 to 81. 6. Split the trailing edge and separate the control lines into right and left groups. Figure 582. Step 3. Setting the brakes. 1. Set the deployment brakes and stow the excess line in the Velcro keepers. Figure 584. 2. The finished toggles should look like Figure 585. Step 4. Folding the canopy. 1. Fold all the trailing edge to one side, then pull the stabilizer panel taut. Figure 586. 2. Flake the trailing edge of the canopy starting with the outboard control lines. Fold each cell in half on top of the D-line group until you get to the center. Figure 587. 3. Repeat with the opposite side. 4. Pull the slider up to the slider stops. 5. Remove remaining clamps from top of canopy. Make sure all suspension lines are in the center of the canopy stack. Figure 588. 6. Fold the center of the trailing edge back to expose the center of the wind channel. Figure 589. 7. Create an S-fold in the stack. Figure 598. Position a packing paddle a third of the way up from the bottom of the canopy length on top of the stack. Figure 591. 9. Place a gun cleaning rod at half the distance between the bottom and the packing paddle under the stack. 10. Pull the rod up and move the canopy with paddle towards container. Figure 592. 11. Pull the top center cell panel down to the bottom of the stack. 12. Wrap the center cell around the folded canopy with the left and right about halfway to the center, then secure with clamps starting at the bottom. Figure 593. The width of the folded canopy should be the width of the D-bag plus 2 inches, 5 centimeters. 13. Continue to wrap the center cell around the canopy stack and secure with additional clamps. Figure 594. Step 5. Placing the canopy into the deployment bag and stowing the lines. 1. Lift the base of the folded canopy and slide the reserve bag underneath. The grommets in the tongue of the bag should be even with the bottom of the stack. Figure 595. 2. Make a second S-fold to match Figure 596. 3. Split the loose fabric at the top to form 2 ears. Figure 597. 4. Gather the center cell material along the middle seam until you reach the bottom. Roll the material under, but do not cover the center cell. Figure 598. 5. Hold down the center cell material and then shape the molar folds. Figure 599. 6. Fold the ends of the molar folds under to create the bulk necessary to fill the top of the reserve bag. Figure 507. When placing the canopy in the bag, allow the folded canopy to stick out 2 to 3 inches at the mouth of the bag to fill the corners of the reserve container. Figure 501. 8. Close bag and secure with the locking stows. Figure 5-102-9. Shape the bag. The shape of the bag should reflect the desired shape of the reserve container. 10. Cover any exposed hook Velcro to avoid contact with the lines. 11. Stow the lines neatly, leaving sufficient line between the bag and riser ends. Figure 5-103-12. Thread the pull-up cord through the closing loop. Step 6. Placing the bag into the container and closing the container. 1. Place reserve risers into the pack tray. Spread the risers with the rear riser to the outside to minimize the bulk against the back pad. Figure 5-104-2. Place the reserve bag into the container and fold the bridle in the center of the bag. Figure 5-105-3. Fold the top yoke portion of the bag over the bridle. Figure 5-106-4. Secure in place with a clamp. Figure 5-107. 5. Use the gun cleaning rod to thread the pull-up cord through the pilot chute. Figure 5-108-6. Center the base of the pilot chute on the center grommet of the deployment bag. 7. Compress the pilot chute while stuffing fabric and mesh between the spring coils. 8. Position the cap of the pilot chute with the arrow facing toward the top or bottom of the container. Figure 5-109. Secure with a temporary pin. 9. If an AAD, such as a cypress, is installed, route the pull-up cord through the cutter first, then through the right, number 1, side flap grommet. Figure 5-110. 10. Next thread the left, number 2, side flap grommet. At the same time, close the side flaps. Figure 5-111. Secure with a temporary pin. 11. Close the bottom flap, number 3, and secure with a temporary pin. Figure 5-112. Note, at this point, you should only be able to pull 1/4-1/2 inch of loop through the first 3 flaps. If you can pull more, the loop is too long. Open container and shorten loop. 12. Close flap number 4 and insert the ripcord pin. Figure 5-113. Caution, place the closing plate on the bottom edge of the inner top flap. This protects the plastic stiffener if you are kneeling on the pin protector flap. The rigger should determine how tight the closing loop is and decide whether to perform a pull test. Warning, maximum allowable pull force on the reserve ripcord is 22 pounds, 10 kilograms. 13. Once you are satisfied that the pull force is less than 22 pounds, 10 kilograms, seal the ripcord and log the pack job. 14. Place the data card in the data card pocket. Figure 5-114-15. Count your tools. 16. Complete the placard data on the orange warning label. Failure to do so voids the TSO. Ram Air Reserve into a 2-pin piggyback. Many sport, military, and pilot emergency rigs feature the 2-pin, externally mounted reserve pilot chute or pop top. The pop top closes use adjustable closing loops that are tightened after the pins are inserted. The following instructions demonstrate the ProPack method without the use of clamps. Figures 5-115 through 5-165. Documentation. One of the most important parts of the packing process is the requirement to keep proper records. 14 CFR Part 65, Section 65.131, specifies the information the rigger is required to document. There are 2 forms of required records. The first is the rigger's logbook. While the exact format is up to the rigger, there are commercially produced logbooks available that provide space for the required notations. The second required record is the parachute data card. Both of these items have been addressed in Chapter 1, Introduction to Parachute Rigging. There are several items of interest regarding the parachute data card. In the past, the data cards usually had information only for the identity of the parachute canopy, which is the primary component of the assembly. In recent years, with the growth of sport parachuting, this configuration is no longer standard. With the proliferation of many makes and models of canopies, harness, and containers, and the ability to interchange components, it is necessary to document the harness and container as well. The data card shown in Chapter 1, Figure 1.8 has multiple identification spaces. With the widespread use of AADs, it has now become necessary to document the information required by the manufacturer, such as the service cycle and battery life. The newest cards have provisions for this information. With the ability to interchange components, what does the rigger do when a reserve canopy is removed from an assembly? Where does the data card go? This is a somewhat gray area, but the common practice is for the card to remain with the canopy. If the harness and container have had work done that requires documentation, it may be necessary for the rigger to fill out a duplicate card with the appropriate notations as to the work done on the harness. Riggers should make sure that they note that this card is a copy of the original. Finally, Riggers are tasked with noting their name and certificate number on the data card. In many cases, this information is illegible. Riggers who take pride and responsibility in their profession and the work they do have no hesitation in letting the public know who did the work. Accordingly, many riggers have a permanent ink stamp with their name, certificate number, and seal symbol that they use to stamp the card and then countersign it. This is the mark of a truly professional rigger. While the seal symbol is not required on the data card, it allows anyone to check the signature against the seal on the parachute. Chapter summary: It is the responsibility of the attending rigger to ensure that the components of the approved parachute system are compatible in terms of shock load capability. This may be as simple as reading and comparing the TSO/data label that is permanently attached to the reserve canopy and the harness. This information may also be found in the respective owner's manuals. If in doubt, call the manufacturers. Size compatibility, which may affect reserve bag extraction force, is of the utmost importance. In their zeal to make rigs more windproof, some manufacturers have created containers that require more force to pull the bag from the container, due to stiffer riser covers, boxing at the top of the container, and longer cantilever pin protector flaps. Such rigs should not be overstuffed. Reserve pilot chutes should be in new condition to provide maximum drag. Again, it should be emphasized that the reason for opening the container every 180 days is to inspect and recertify the canopy and container system for another 180 days. Recent language published by the FAA clarifies what the service life of a parachute is by stating that the rigger may extend the life of the system 180 days at a time, so effectively the service life of any parachute TSO'd under C-23B, C-23C, and C-23D is 180 days.